So let's talk about AI. I mean, just to give you a little context first, the goal of this series is really to, I mean, I know there's so much conversation around AI. It's
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
all anyone can talk about, and a lot of it is like pontificating, just broad stroke. This is the end days. This is the best days. Blah blah blah. And then there's the reality in the middle of like how are actual cool creative people using it and how
Hmm.
will we all kind of use it or not or think about it or not in the coming months, years, decades. So the goal of this interview is to kind of really dive into that part of things, like how are you actually using it, if at all? How are you thinking about it these days? Let me tell you what I understand your your vibe on AI to be, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. From what I can tell, you seem to
Old man
be,
yells at sky.
yeah, a little bit, but more just like this isn't great. It's not for me, and I'm a little annoyed that other people are talking about it all the time. Which how because maybe that's also some of what I have in me. So I might be
Mhm.
projecting, but is that how would
No,
you
I mean,
characterize it?
yeah. Well, first of all, you're tapping into an accurate sort of all-purpose curmudgeon
Yes.
aspect of my personality that I don't disavow. Um, yeah, I think I've been through various sort of phases of viewpoints. Like there was a time when I mean, a brief time when I felt myself very, very convinced by the kind of real science fiction doomer arguments about
Yes.
uh, AI and the sort of instantaneous eradication of all humanity one day, next month,
Yes.
kind of thing. But this was sort of that was a little earlier, prior to the recent ChatGPT releases, and that was probably several years ago. Now I just sort of find myself thinking that, yeah, I what's the way to put this? I feel like at the most extreme end, I sort of feel like I'm sometimes going crazy because it seems so clear to me that certain ways in which people are thinking about LLMs and integrating them into their lives are kind of not honest, not authentic. Like
Mm.
it's not what's really going on. There's
Mm.
this the thing that I found specifically bothering me is this the readiness that people have to kind of uh, believe or proceed as if there's a consciousness there, right?
Mhm.
Not a position on whether AIs are conscious, not a kind of philosophy of mind thing, but just the sort of the basic idea that you are in some kind of a relationship with this
Yeah.
uh, code and this generated output, and and then also when it comes to sort of the creator economy, and we can talk about this in more detail, but like uh, a growing sense that um, there could well be an argument from there could well be an important reason not to go too far into these use of these tools in order to retain a sort of a raison d'etre in an economic sense, to have a sort of competitive edge. There could be a real benefit to sort of doubling down on the purely human instead of allowing oneself to be shaped by these tools in the way that I think I see people being shaped by them.
Mhm.
But I should probably say at the same time, right, I'm not coming at this from the perspective that like there's no possibility that this has any merit, or that there aren't going to be an already great sort of innovations in certain corners of scientific research, for example, that are
Yeah.
really transformed by it. So I'm not a total luddite.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. One thing I clocked early on in all of this, AI stuff is the language around it. Like when we say
Hmm.
Google, we say I Googled something, right? Like I'm the
Hmm.
guy doing the Googling. But with ChatGPT,
Yeah.
you refer to it as ChatGPT did it. So like we gave it
Right.
agency pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
hard to like claw back even if we wanted to, and I think most people don't even realize that they are, kind of giving it soul, because they assume it either has it, or they're just not thinking much about that. But why do you think that
Yeah,
bothers you
I think you're.
specifically? Like,
It's interesting. What I'm about to say may cause people to like completely dismiss me as being worth listening to on any level, but I have been uneasy about something similar, like all the way back to the advent of like Alexa and smart speakers, and
yes,
that kind
yes,
of voice activated technology. I have I'm the kind of person who always claims I'm not going to adopt this or that technology, and then I do, like everybody else, and come to depend on it. But actually, the voice activated stuff is an exception to that rule. Um,
mm-hmm,
we don't have it in our house, and I'm probably the main person, the main cause of that. And I've always felt that there's something really just kind of creepy
yeah,
about the idea of a technology that invites me to treat it as if there's a
yes,
person there, uh, while at the same time sort of existing to do my to obey my every command.
yes,
Um, because like it is perhaps a sort of hyperbolic uh, analogy, but we recognize that the while the primary reason that like slavery or indentured servitude is a moral abomination is what it does to the people who are indentured or enslaved. There is something kind of deeply corrupting about being
totally.
someone who treats someone else as property. And I think probably people who know more about Kantian ethics than me would bring that in here and say like that whole concept of treating a person as nothing but a means to your end is like depraved in some way. And although it's
Mm-hmm,
obviously not the same thing when it's just Alexa, there is that sort of like, it's not that anyone intellectually thinks there's someone inside the smart speaker, but it's that sort of I don't even know what the word is, some sort of orientation that you have in
totally.
your interactions.
Yeah.
um and it's years ago now that people were noticing that Alexa made turn their kids into assholes because they
Mm-hmm,
trained
mm-hmm,
them to just sort of bark commands, and then they had to
totally.
be reminded that they were allowed to bark commands at that lady in the box, but they weren't allowed to bark
Right.
commands at their mum or their dad. So I think that is one of the pieces of this, right? This kind of I really don't think anything good comes from from sort of convincing oneself that there's a person where there isn't, and that it probably damages one's relationships with real people. And then I guess separately there is this whole idea that like there's something sort of, well, then there's to do with like, yeah, what the output is, and what the importance of being the person who does the writing is, and all that. But that's kind of a slightly separate dimension to it, I suppose.
But I like that I think that let's go there a little bit. Like, how do you feel about that? Um, and I mean, do you use it at all? Or are you not using it at all?
I mean, I am. I I mean, firstly, I suspect all of us are using it in lots of ways that we can't control, right? In terms of it being behind other
Yeah.
services and platforms that we're using. Other than that, I really am. I saw somebody classify like what the different how the different generations interacted
Mhm.
with uh, AI, and it said that for Gen X it's a slightly glorified search engine, and that's that. And I'm just
Mhm.
pure Gen X in that
Yeah.
regard. So I do
Yeah.
use Perplexity because
Mhm.
it's way better than Google is now for
Mhm.
finding links to existing sources, right? And so
Mhm.
yeah, that will be kind of, it seems kind of it would be dumb on some level to refuse to do that because I think it's ChatGPT, isn't it? It would be the is the sort of motor behind that. But that's really pretty much it. Um, like I have definitely sort of experimented here and there with more. I one of the things that raises my hackles is seeing the claim that the only reason not to be in awe of and fully dedicated to these technologies is that you haven't used them enough to see what they're capable of. I think it's certainly true that people who use ChatGPT an awful lot in their lives come to think it's really great, but that cuts both ways. I'm not sure what that says. Whether that says that whether that's because they're discovering its extraordinary depths, or because they're sort of mesmerizing themselves into the understanding that is the way to work. And I'm not saying this won't change at all. I don't think I'm sort of putting a stake in the ground to say I will never extend my use of these tools in the research phases of writing, but it seems totally clear to me that I don't want either to use it to create first drafts of things I'm writing, because first drafts are not just kind of amateurish stabs at things. They are where the concepts are connecting, or the structure of the piece is being sort of imperfectly built. And then, nor really do I want to use it for the later stages where my voice, which as a writer, which a person may rate or not my voice, but it's kind of all I've got, I feel like, in terms of making what I do distinctive and worth reading. That's the stage at which that is put in. And you can always find edge cases, right? And do I object to people running their newsletter posts through LLMs to catch grammatical mistakes? Like, that would be really stupid to sort of object on principle to that, I suspect. But still, I really feel like the thing that I'm doing when I'm bringing ideas together and trying to create some piece of writing is it. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to the possibility that I'm just a out of touch old man at this point. But it's like it. The conscious engagement with those processes is the point. And every sort of way in which one could skip those steps would seem to me to reduce the meaning and value of the process. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I do you care if other people do it, or does that not bother you?
So I think the point I've made in little bits of writing here and there is something like this. It's that when I read a piece of writing, and let's stick to writing for now, because it's the one I know the best and seems to be the sort of canonical case. When I read a piece of writing that someone else has written, then in most cases, I think that it is critical to the value of that experience that I am reading the words that emerged from their own conscious, emoting, thinking sensibility, right? It's like, it's not just that the points made are good ones, or the facts involved are accurate ones, or even that the writing is stylish or something. It's the fact that it came from another consciousness, a bit like mine. So it's an instance of a relationship, and I think that's true with possibly not all forms of writing, but when I'm reading a novel, there's something very important about the fact that, for me, that this emerges from the conscious sensibility of the novelist. And so, there was this, it's sort of gone away now, but there was this kind of back and forth between AI skeptics and promoters a while ago, which sort of hung on whether AI would ever be able to write a novel to the same standard as a human novelist. And some people said, "Oh, this never could happen." And then clearly it would be pointed out to them that it effectively already had happened, that this was all sort of yesterday's news. And my argument
Hmm.
was always not that an LLM, that what's important about a novel written by Jane Austen is not that it's unimaginable that an LLM could create something of equal merit because humans are just super magic or something. It's the fact that it was written by Jane Austen is a big part of what gives it
Exactly.
its value. So
Yeah.
it's not just about the sort of end result. It's about where the end result comes from. And to that end, yes, I think that if you, I think I do care that the people I'm reading, I think I do care that they don't, that they aren't heavily or overwhelmingly um, relying on LLMs to generate what I'm reading.
Hmm.
At this point, someone will say, "Well, but you can't tell," and I'm sure you've already been tricked many times already, or I'm sure you've already read lots written by LLMs that you didn't realize was written by. Absolutely, don't deny that at all. The point I'm making is that, you know, when I do find out, I think something shifts
Right.
in my experience of the product completely.
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
Right.
I'm
And it's a,
repeating something I
yeah.
put. I'm
Go
repeating
ahead.
something I put in a new. Sorry, just very quickly.
No, no,
I
no, no.
mean,
You go.
I uh, I I submit to sound like a lawyer, that if we had here an interesting conversation and you were somewhat interested in the ideas that I was communicating and I was interested in your responses and your thoughts about these topics, and you left the conversation feeling like, okay, that was a useful use of a bit of my time, that was interesting, it was not completely meaningless, there was something worth doing about that, and you then discovered that all along you'd been
Yeah.
interacting with a simulation, even if the ideas were somewhat interesting, because they would still be there, right? Something really important would be sort of sapped from that experience, like, right? It
Yeah.
would it, something would be gone because it turned out that there wasn't a person there.
Well, and because you would have deceived me, like I would have felt lied to, right? Like someone. I think it's that kind of personal, like I was tricked, into believing one thing and it wasn't true. And I think people really don't like that feeling of like that's just like not okay to be tricked like that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's sort of quite a deep point because it exists on that very obvious level of, like, you know if I present my Substack newsletter as being the musings of a person, but in fact there is no
Right.
such person, and it's just I'm writing 50 of these by prompting uh, generative AI. But there's also this kind of subtler level in which almost any kind of writing that comes from a perspective that implies that the author has certain thoughts and feelings and priorities in life and opinions, like, is already implying that it's human created, even if
Hmm.
even if you were sort of technically honest about the fact that it was an AI. So I'm not sure I'm conveying this properly, but this sort of, like, if I if I read something and no claim is explicitly made that it's by a human being, so there's no lying in that sense, but, like, the very act of sort of telling me what you think about things is to assert that you are a conscious sensibility. And if you're not, then the whole thing is just, yeah, what are we doing here? Now, there are types of
Well,
writing
it's
that this doesn't apply
yeah.
to, right? I mean, I think it's clear that I don't care if the instruction manual for my new dishwasher or
Right.
something has been created in that
Right.
way. I think we got to be honest about that. But for writing where it matters that it came from a person, not because an LLM won't be able to write and can't already write things like better than I can write them by whatever standard we're using for better, but because there's no one there.
So yeah, that I in an earlier interview, this writer David Perel brought up the kind of this point that like he thinks that there's going to be there will be two types of writing, right? The kind that like puts the
Mhm.
reader in the driver's seat, which is like informational, like I need to know where to go in Brooklyn. And it's going to like give you a piece that's LLM created just for you. Nobody wrote it. And then there's the, ride along style, the Joan Didion, the like, here's me. And you get to
Mhm.
like come on my journey. Um, I mean, what do you think about that? Even as I say it, I'm like, yeah, but I
Yeah,
sometimes want
yeah.
the first one to also be a person, you know? I don't know. What do you think?
Right. No, I think I love David Perel's work and his long form interviews with the writers. I think he's right about the distinction.
Yeah.
I don't know how big the set of things where there being no human involved isn't a problem. I don't know how big that is, right? So I think that, you know, absolutely in those old rough guides and Lonely Planet, physical tourist guidebooks, which are repositories of information that could, and in many ways I know are being taken on by AI these days. I mean, that sort of role, even there's often very much a real sense that, it matters that was put together by a group of people going to those places and seeing them and sharing them
Yeah.
with you. So that's a harder case. The sort of technical writing for how to use an appliance feels like the kind of the other extreme, partly just because we're probably already so accustomed to
Yeah.
poor quality product in that regard. Now I'm starting to think it would be fantastic to have kind of really beautifully authored dishwasher
I was just
uh,
gonna say. I was just gonna say
instructions.
that.
We should.
Like Joan Didion
I mean,
writing like how do you make your dishwasher would be incredible.
no, exactly. And even if that's silly and not going to happen, like that incredibleness, that tells you something. The fact that that's a cool thought tells you something. Um,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
you know, I I do think that one thing that people have said. I thought that was where you were going with David Perel's observations. There is that those of us who want to either produce and sell or consume human written writing are going to be engaged in a sort of premium. It's like microbreweries and premium uh, coffee roasting, right? It's like a sort of
Hmm.
artisanal sector for whatever
Yeah.
proportion of the population hasn't had their jobs taken away by AI and can afford to do such things. And I think that's probably there might be some truth to that. Already working as an author is being in a weird little niche industry. I mean, it's not. It's already it's already pretty
Totally.
small, and so uh, I can see that, and maybe the market for maybe most people don't think like me, and they'll settle for something that I turn my nose up at, and that's because I'm a snob in some sense, and there's always a market for the cultural products that please snobs. But I do think there's something substantive here, right? It's not just kind of a uh, nostalgic commitment to the human for the sake of it. There's something very, very real about the importance of there being a human author. The question is whether enough people care to make it financially viable, I suppose.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say earlier. It seems like right now the open question of culture um, is it okay to lie about this sort of thing? Right? Like because we've like the lying as a problem is an age old thing, right? Like I was talking to my friends about the Million Little Pieces dude who wrote that memoir, and then it was
Yep,
on Oprah, and then it
yep,
turned out that he didn't write it, and it was a huge scandal because it was like,
yep,
dude, you lied to us, you
yep,
know? And it's
yep.
like I think the question now is like if the and there were probably 10 cases where someone lied and we didn't find out, but it's like whatever. If someone
Yeah.
were to get outed now, would it be a problem? I think the answer is yes. You know, I don't, I think
Outed as
already it's kind of as like that you mostly wrote something with AI, right?
yeah,
Like if
yeah,
your next book, it like came out that Oliver Burkeman like barely touched that thing,
hmm yeah.
would that be bad? You know, or would that be okay? Because with a ghostwriter, it's fine, but that's mainly for celebrities. I don't know. It gets real weird. It gets muddy.
Yeah, and a lot of contracts. I think mine, because my contracts are fairly standard, have their sort of. There's definitely, publishers are definitely requiring that what authors submit to them in return for their advance money is not generated uh,
Interesting.
to any
That's cool.
significant degree by AI. Um, yeah, I mean, it gets us back to this question of the lie, right? I mean, the it should definitely be a problem if you claim to have if you claim or strongly imply that the book has been written largely by you thinking things up and going and finding them out, and actually a significant proportion of it was written by AI. The more sort of tricky question comes when, like, is there any problem at all with that if it's all just open and honest, right? Like if there's an author's note at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning saying about,
Mm-hmm.
most of this I did this way, is that a problem? And I'm not saying people shouldn't be allowed to do it if they're being open and transparent about it, but I do think there's a problem in terms of, like, yeah, I mean, I in most cases I'm just not going to want to read that. I'm just not going to want to
Exactly.
consume that writing. Uh, I saw someone online put it. If you can't be bothered to write it, I'm not sure why I should be bothered
Yeah.
to read it. This actually goes to this question. Like, I wrote this whole, well, two books really on the finitude of human life, and how the fact that we have the sort of
Mm-hmm.
finite time is a terrifying thing, but also kind of gives value to what we do. And
Yes.
there is something important there too, right? It's like you're going to pay whatever it is for a copy of a book. Something important is about There's something important about the fact that, like, I used up a bunch of my time to create
Yes.
that, and I gave that time to that when I could have given it to something else, and I thereby created some kind of value that I've got the temerity to ask you to to pay for. Um,
Yeah.
and I thought about it, and I used up some of my time doing that thinking, and I'm asking you to use up some of your time doing the reading. And this all just takes place within the world of human limitation, where scarcity generates value, and that's why it's worth your while paying for and dedicating time to a book. And something's gone wrong with that if it actually took me none of my valuable time at all.
Yeah.
Um, because then, like, what's going on in that transaction, and why should you pay? I guess many people would say that the value of books in that context would, uh, you know, tend towards zero. And then
Mm-hmm.
why should you give your time to it?
Right. And I think already all of this is kind of true in that, like, there's all those apps that like summarize a book for you in 10 minutes, and it's like nobody likes that stuff. That stuff sucks. Like we all kind of know it sucks. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's just sort of these like laws of physics almost when it comes to like good stuff. And it's like I don't know, I find that I try to rest in those when
hmm
I'm freaking out about this stuff. Or I'm just like, I think it's just gonna be fine. I think people like good stuff. They know when it's shitty, you know. Like I don't know. There's not like depth to that maybe, but it's people can just tell. I find a lot of solace in that. That people can just tell.
People can just tell. I think the models are nowhere near good enough for people to be completely unable to tell all the time. But again, even if we get quite soon, which I suppose we might, to a point where people can't just tell, like, even that is not doesn't like, I think you're right to be sort of somewhat optimistic about that particular aspect of it, but it's like it, it won't what am I trying to say? If I'm right that it matters that something is created by a human emoting conscious sensibility or not, then it will still matter just as
Right.
much
Right.
when people can't necessarily tell that the difference is there. The point is, once I find out, and so trust becomes this incredibly
Yes.
important thing. You need to be able to trust that the person whose newsletter you're subscribing to is 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 producing it at least to a significant degree themselves. And people sporadically propose kind of symbols and logos that people are going to
Yeah.
display on their newsletters to prove it. And of course, it won't prove anything because you could use it
Yeah.
on an AI generated newsletter, and then when the AIs are setting up the Substack accounts themselves, they will obviously want to use those
Right.
those logos to give credibility to their output. But there's something maybe admirable in that basic sort of the sort of motivation behind that
Yeah.
kind of thing. I don't know whether it'll work or not.
Yeah. One of the other writers who, Venkatesh Rao, I don't know if you know him. He does a lot of like online. Yeah. So he's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
like pro AI, uses it in his writing, says like right now he has it in a different section of his Substack, but he says soon he'll
Hmm.
just kind of combine it all. And he's still doing a ton of work, but
Right.
it's not like he's just like blah blah blah. He's working with it. But
Hmm.
he had this take that I wanted to get your thoughts on, which is just that like the very idea of like an individual being responsible for a piece of work is
Hmm.
fairly recent, like of the last 500 years, a 500 blip in history, I think he said. Where before that, like artists did not at all feel like they were the ones that produced something. It was much more like, God spoke through them or something, and they were
Hmm.
the vessel. And that there was like a
Hmm.
linguistic commons that, or an artistic commons that,
Hmm.
people just kind of moved stuff through them. Um, and that maybe AI is a return to that. What do you make of that?
It's such an interesting thought, and partly I want to sort of turn the tables and say it's exactly that kind of um, idiosyncratic thought that
Yeah.
has made me value the writing that I've come across from him. So it's like, uh, put that in your pipe and smoke it. But I guess the the question is, I mean, I'd need some time to think about this, but I think that I'm sure that that's an accurate account of history. There are sort of extreme versions of this, according to which people just only thought about creativity as the gods speaking through them until some time a few thousand years ago, and certainly all sorts of kind of workshop based art production in the
Hmm.
Renaissance, people works carrying the imprimatur of somebody without them necessarily having touched it, and the ways in which kind of people like Andy Warhol brought that
Yeah.
into the um, contemporary era. I'm just spitballing here. I haven't got a. This is not a perfect LLM style response, but I would suggest that there's the idea that there's a sort of modern or the romantic idea, I guess, of the sort of individual writer who is the sort of, or the individual artist who is the sort of genius in single self-contained genius who's putting these miraculous things out into the world. And then there's the idea that in fact what that person is doing is channeling something from beyond their own simple egoic consciousness, that it's the collective unconscious, or it's the sort of
Yeah.
all the sort of mythic resources of that culture. Now, those two things seem in some ways just to be different ways of talking about the same thing. Maybe the latter is sort of truer somehow. the kind of role of aggregate and generic um, writing and thought that seems to me to be at the core of how the LLMs work seems to be like a separate thing, right? So I'm uncomfortable with that idea that
Mm,
because the collective consciousness or the sort of mythological world is collective, that therefore just because LLMs are based on something collective too, that they're the same thing. It seems like it's one thing to talk about the specific way in which one writer or group of writers, say, expresses tales that have been in the culture in broader ways for forever, or they might experience themselves as giving voice to um, ideas that are moving through them rather than coming from them. And something else entirely to just take a whole collection of individuals and the work that they all produced as individuals in the normal way we think about it. Anyway, most of them probably thinking of their work in that way. Train large language models on that stuff, and then have them put out. I mean, I'm at the limits of my technical understanding here for certain, but I do think that as I understand how those how these AIs um, create their outputs, there is something sort of deeply and fundamentally tending towards the generic, towards
hmm
the most sort of the sort of averaging out of
yeah.
perspectives and viewpoints and opinions, right? So I'm not. I know the sort of probabilistic next word generator critique is kind of contested in various ways, but in some fundamental way, it seems to me that there's something kind of anti-creative going on in that process because it can only possibly be uh, exerting a sort of tendency towards making what you do with them generic and generic is not the same as collective necessarily. Wow, yeah, I don't. I need to think about that. Big thoughts.
I think I get what you're saying. And I also got what he was saying. I mean, I find that
Hmm.
whenever I'm whoever I'm talking to, I kind of just am like, yeah, I bet that person's mostly right. But I also feel like I I don't know. My where I kind of land on it is like, do I actually feel good when I'm using it if I'm using it for creative
Right.
work? And right now for me the
Right.
answer is like not really. I just
Right.
don't feel good. It just doesn't feel, I guess that's where I keep coming back to is like the feeling of it. But it's just like I feel a little gross. I don't feel very creative. I don't know. Maybe I'm a curmudgeon too then. But like
Hmm.
that's just kind of I
Right. And
can
that
tell I don't like how it
right,
makes
but
me
that bring
feel, you know?
right. And there's two things I want to say about that. Like one of them is sure, maybe that is a kind of intuitive pointer towards the attitude you should be taking towards these things, but also just that feeling in and of itself is like that's why we do these things, right? It's like it's
Mhm.
it, on some level to spend your large parts of your life doing this stuff is in order to feel, in some sense good about doing it. Not that you're going to be cheery and happy at every single stage of the creative process, or no one I know anyway, but that you know if you don't feel good about it persistently, then that's its own message. Like why do that thing uh, with your life?
Well, yeah, and I think the very fact that you're not like I don't expect to feel cheery and happy. I actually expect the opposite. And then I expect maybe to like kind of get to the other side of that for a little bit, you know. But I think with
Yeah,
LLMs, it kind of just like cuts out that part where it's like a mess and I kind of hate myself and like that's half the thing for me is to like get to the other side of that,
yeah. No,
right?
that's a
Is like
yeah.
is maybe
Yeah, no, yeah,
for a brief moment,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way of putting it. Yes. I mean, when you say it doesn't feel good to use AI, you're not saying that when you're not using AI, you feel just tip top at
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
point in the process. But I think what you're feeling, I would say, is something like a sort of authentic engagement with reality, right? You're in life, um, and
Yes.
that can absolutely be uh, that can absolutely be a very unpleasant experience, but it's an alive experience.
Yes. Yes. And it's the recognition of it that I find kind of the best, to like even when it's
Hmm.
bad, you know, especially when it's
Yeah,
bad
and I
actually,
think yeah,
cuz our society is really not great at being okay with that part, So I find that art that does that,
yeah,
I'm like, "Yes, thank God." You know?
and I mean maybe what we're coming to here is some sort of more consensus kind of conclusion that if you have a clear sense of what gives you the feeling that what you're doing is meaningful, if you have a clear sense of what it is, then maybe there are people for whom it absolutely isn't this process of um, you know thinking the thoughts and manually and consciously bringing the ideas into connection with each other and trying to or doing all the things that LLMs take off your hands. And I guess maybe that's fine. I struggle to see what the um, meaning is if it isn't that, but you know, quite possibly there are, I don't know, people who find other parts of the overall process of kind of deciding what to write about, doing the writing, putting it out into the world to be the fulfilling parts. Um, and I think the really important thing is to have a clear-eyed sense of what you find um,
Yeah.
meaningful in what you're doing, and not sort of outsource precisely the bit that gave it the meaning, which is something we're prone to do in lots of areas of life, I think.
Right. For the often the reasons that you write about a lot, which are like, I gotta save time, like, and I gotta make money, right? I need to figure out how to make money doing this thing I love, so let me like fast track it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, right,
Um,
right. And I mean, clearly that's what's driving a lot of it, right? It's the sense that you go do this or you'll get left behind, and then you
yeah.
won't be able to make a living. I I have a hunch, and it's not much more than a hunch, although we've discussed some good arguments for it here, I think. But like that it might be the other way around. That it might be that my
Mm,
best chance of continuing to make a living doing this thing that I find meaningful is to um, is to not join the race to do the thing that everyone else is doing, therefore thereby
mm,
making myself the same as everyone else and not worth buying the books from, because what's the difference?
hmm Yeah, that's kind of my last question was around like, advice for writers and creatives, either who are a little bit further along or who are just getting started, who like, you
Hmm.
know, don't want to fully use AI, but are worried about whether that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you feel that you have something to say, or a perspective, a viewpoint, however you define that, to communicate to the world, it's a matter of experiment, and these days experimenting is easier than it's ever been. But it's to sort of give up on the chance of that resonating with people before you've even tried would seem to be
Mhm,
uh, a tragedy. So I would definitely encourage anyone who feels um, that sense of dissonance between what they're being asked to do and what they think they really bring to the world, to focus on what they really bring to the world for at least a bit, to see how people respond, because I think that
mhm,
people are going to continue and ever more vigorously respond positively to the sort of marks of the signs of the human, uh, and the very best way to do that is just to be a human doing it, rather than try desperately to create prompts for LLMs so that they'll make it sound like it was done by a human.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of great art that's going to come out is actually going to be maybe about that dissonance, right? That conflict
Yeah, yeah,
between what you feel like basically the economy wants you to do and what you want to do.
hmm
You know, like the new version of that is going to be around AI. Um,
yeah. No, absolutely. And I've always felt on this kind of issue of like, how much do you compromise what you want to be doing in order to make it financially viable? There will always be people who basically suggest that the answer is you compromise everything, right? You just jump
mhm,
on the bandwagon and go with the herd. But at a certain point in that process, and they very rarely go this far in their arguments, at a certain point in that process, like, retrain as a plumber, and that might be a brilliant thing to do, by the way. I'm not against that in any way, but like, why continue to why insist on continuing to travel under the banner of I'm a writer if you
mhm,
are automating away all those aspects? Like, if you're going to go that far, then maybe that's just not the thing
mhm,
for you to be doing that would bring you alive in life. And like, that's great. It is for me, but everyone's different. That sort of
mhm.
desire to cling on to a certain kind of label while actually not doing any of the things that are involved in it, seems like the only wrong answer
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
question.
yeah. Okay, cool. So we there's two more little parts. They're very quick though, so we're almost done.
Okay.
One is just
All right.
like a recipe part. I don't know if you have any to share of like how you use it. You talked a little bit about like perplexity, but I'm curious if there are any specific kind of use cases of how you are finding it useful AI in your creative process. Even if that is just perplexity, but
Um,
like about something specific or whatever.
yeah, I mean, basically, the only use case here is I use Perplexity to uh, generate uh, lists of other sources, pretty much all of which are written by individual human beings. So I'm drawn to the way that Perplexity footnotes and links the sources in its output. There's something about the search engine field that doesn't I'm using natural language for the queries, but I'm not sort of engaging in uh, back and forth dialogue as if with a human. I'm just
Mhm,
typing in. I feel quite free not to use please and thank you or
mhm, mhm.
question marks. It's just how I would use Google. Honestly, it feels like I'm just using it because of the famous decline in the quality
I know.
of Google as search in the last few years. So honestly speaking, that's that's where I'm at with it. And maybe this will just seem completely. I mean, for some people, it will already seem completely absurd. But maybe this will just seem completely absurd in a few years' time to everybody, even to me. I still think that's probably a price worth paying for
Yeah.
continuing to find the experience of writing as meaningful, albeit infuriating and maddening, as
Though
I
again, like
currently do.
that's maybe the point is that it's
Right,
infuriating.
right, right. On some level, yeah, no, absolutely. Uh, yeah, I'm not trying to smooth the edges away out of that
Exactly.
process completely because that's what makes it worth doing.
Yeah. All right, last quick thing is a speed round. So these are just quick questions. You can answer with a few words, a sentence, and then we will be done. We will have done it.
Okay,
So, how
awesome.
would you describe your relationship with AI? Is it an assistant, a partner? Someone described it as like their nurse. Any kind of how would you describe that relationship you have with it? If one at all with a person, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think in relationship terms.
Mm,
For when it comes to AI, I
fair.
don't think I don't think you only have to have relationships with living beings, right? I feel like you can have a relationship with a landscape or a place. So it's not like the word is completely um, inapplicable, but no, I try quite hard to keep it the kind of relationship that I have with like my MacBook or my or the pens I use. Right,
Mhm.
it's a tool, and I don't want to forget that.
Yeah. What do you wish AI could do but fear that it never will?
Again, I'm not sure that I uh, want in creative work. I'm not sure that I want it to do anything that it doesn't yet do. Obviously, you know, if there are specialist domains where it can cure cancer, I'm not
Mm.
going to be sitting here saying don't do
No.
that because
Yeah.
I'm not completely insane. But no, I sort of start from a place that makes me not want to answer that question, I guess.
Fair. Everyone is making predictions about AI. Let's make a prediction about humans. Where do you think humans will be in 10 years?
I think it can be very hard to see in times that feel very full of change and volatility and human and civic society falling apart and civilization collapsing. I think it can be very hard to see the truth of that very well known observation that by far the best gamble you can make about how we'll be in 10 years is how we are now. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that sort of like messy, at each other's throats, boundlessly creative, constantly on the verge of like destroying ourselves, but not actually doing so. That just seems to me like by far the most plausible scenario 10 years from now.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be nice if it was better than
What
that, but that's my prediction.
Yeah. What question about AI and creativity isn't being asked enough?
Well, I don't know how to phrase this, but it is that question of like how much of the value of creativity of creative products is connected to the sentient, uh, emoting, thinking awareness of the creator. I think this we talk a bit about whether AI is or could be conscious and what that would mean, but I think we could do with talking a bit more about how human creators are conscious and why that matters so much to what they produce.
Cool. And last question, what do you wish people talked about more instead of AI?
Almost anything. Um, I I think that I, I don't know what the name for this topic is, but I think we need to be thinking and talking so much more than we do about. Uh, well, I guess cognitive empathy is one of the phrases that have been used in this area, right? Sort of talking about
Mm,
trying to get inside the minds of people radically different from us, not in order to sort of be convinced by them or to compromise our views
mhm.
somewhere between ours and theirs, but just to sort of just to spend more time thinking about what it's like to come from inside another person's consciousness. I think that is right at the heart of a lot of our civic and political issues at the moment.
Are you working on anything new? Anything we can sneak peek to people?
I am working on a new book. It's very hard to exactly say what it's about at this point. I'm not being coy. I'm just struggling for the language, but it is something closely connected to this idea of like aliveness or what it is that gives human life that feeling of being worth living. And so AI is definitely implicated in this discussion, although
Cool.
I'm not going to write a book on AI because there are enough of those.
I can't wait to read it. Oliver, thank you so much. This was awesome. Seriously, this was
It's
really,
a
really good.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for your enormous patience in setting this up. I've appreciated that.
No problem. It was well worth
All
it.
right. Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
All right.
Cheers.
Take
Bye.
care.